I know that a lot of your music has sort of not focused around, but has referenced sort of ancient tribal civilizations, and has talked about some of the dangers of organized religion as a sort of a theme. Maybe I live in a sort of a little bubble of liberal hippies, but I feel like young people, young white people today are sort of becoming more comfortable discussing the history of colonialism and understanding the effect that sort of the rapid spread of European culture has had on the world. And also, I think it's easier for young people to be openly atheist or openly question sort of the authority structures of government and religion in ways that maybe they weren't even able to, or that were looked down upon. How do you guys feel about sort of, I don't know, like how young people can sort of approach the topic, and how do you sort of want that message to be received for people who are maybe questioning the sort of the structures that they've grown up in under their parents?
Well, I guess that's just a normal evolution thing. I guess whenever people get more enlightened as we evolve as a society, right? So you know more in science, in religion, in life. So I guess it's a normal way of how things should go or will go in the future. I guess maybe in that case, Christianity is a little bit more advanced already than maybe the Islam, because they're more like, how do you say it, more orthodox still, and it's more difficult for Muslims to break away from that. And I think maybe in Christianity that's already happened a little bit more. But the main thing is, and that's the topics you mentioned, they are more from our first albums, like the first three, I guess.
Yep.
And later on, what the overall theme is. Also, if you talk about religion and ancient civilizations, but the thing is, you just have to think for yourself, and trust in yourself instead of only science or only religion or only what I tell you to do, right?
Sure. Yeah. I don't think anyone is looking for an artist or anybody to sort of tell them what to think. But
yeah, and that's also, even if Epica is talking about those issues, it's not like we necessarily put out a statement or like, that's wrong, so you should do this.
Right.
Maybe
I don't think of you guys as a political band.
No, like maybe apart from the fact that we do kind of like to spread the idea of, if you go for what you feel is right, then that's okay.
Without hurting anybody else.
Yeah, but either way, it's more like, okay, this happens, and let's put it out there, because some people are not aware of it. Or also with the latest albums, both latest full albums, they're dealing about quantum physics and how this can kind of change how you look on the world, because it's very strange matter, literally.
Yeah.
And so that kind of puts the whole perspective of how we have always seen the world. It kind of puts a question mark next to it, and we don't know the answer.
Can you talk about the closeness and sort of interrelationships between bands like yourselves and Camelot and all these other bands that sort of have exchanged members, and members know each other, and
Well, that's not necessarily because of the music, but more that. Well, it is because of the music, because you meet at festivals and you tour together, and you kind of get to know all these bands, right? For instance, now we're touring with Lacuna Coil.
right?
I used to, play their CDs every time when I was younger. They're around a little bit more than, or a little bit longer than we are, and I was a huge fan. Then I kind of forgot about them, and now it's really fun to tour with them.
Mm-hmm.
But with Camelot or Nightwish, I don't necessarily like to mirror myself to them or look at them as if we do the same thing. I'd rather just do my own stuff, and people they make up a story about how it fits together or who was first or who whatever, right? So it doesn't really matter. I think you should believe in your own strength, and then I necessarily don't even listen to symphonic metal when I'm at home, actually.
Why do you think it's so metal? I think when people think of it, they think a lot about sort of Northern European countries, and then it has this extraordinary pocket of popularity in Japan, and then a little bit also in Latin America, South America. Why do you think these little pockets where it pops up, and why do you think that in Northern Europe it's so strong?
It's not like that. I think it's the same everywhere. It depends on, you have to place it against how big the country is and how big the market is. I think it's a niche market everywhere, but somehow the Americans believe that everybody in Europe likes that kind of music. Maybe because there are more European bands that make this kind of music. But like maybe the people in Holland believe that every big rock or pop star comes from the US, which is probably not true at all. So
yeah,
I guess you have a market. We played everywhere around the world. From South Africa to Japan to Australia to South America. There's a market for it everywhere.
Okay,
I think.
But yeah, sometimes bands like to create the perception that if they're really doing well in a certain country, of course they'll put it out there, like see how big we are, right? Which doesn't necessarily mean they're really big in somewhere else in the world. So yeah, some bands are really huge in Europe and they don't mean anything in the US, or they're really big in Japan, literally, like the song, and back at home they barely sell albums. So it's a strange thing, but I guess in every country, also I'm from Belgium, it's one of the smallest countries in the world, I guess. Even there you have like superstars, and from the moment they say that there will be a tour, like, or a couple of shows, a minute later they're sold out. And if they just cross the border, they drive for 2 hours, they want to play a show in Holland, no one is showing up, so they don't even go there. And I guess every country has those kind of local stars, and that also happens with metal bands.
It's probably even city to city in some cases.
Sometimes, yeah. Well, depends on the country, I guess. Back in the, like, a little while back, you could even tell the difference between East and West Germany, where, certain, or how they behave. Same with North or South US. It's different.
For sure. Or East and West, yeah.
Or East and West, yeah, exactly. So even in the same country, you can have a difference. Again, I'm from Belgium. The South is speaking French. I'm speaking Flemish. Even in that little tiny country, there is a difference between North and South.
For sure. Yeah, we just got back from Montreal, and it's so funny that even on different sides of the city, you go from French to English-speaking culture, just within streets.
Yeah.
It suddenly changes.
Yeah.
How do you guys approach, because your music has to be able to scale from the band performing to the band performing with a choir to performing with an orchestra and a string section and a big choir. Like, how do you sort of do you initially write with the knowledge and the ability to scale as a part of the plan, or do you have to go back and revisit your work and sort of rearrange and recompose for those larger performances when they happen?
In the live performances, you have to rearrange stuff a little bit and write it for that actual amount of musicians or whatever instruments you're using.
However you have for that night. Yeah.
But I guess since it's symphonic metal, the music is originally written for to be performed with live orchestra and choir. So the choir, the choir when it's recorded, it's written down, and how big you make how big of a choir you use, it doesn't really matter. I guess only if you use different instruments, like certain kind of woodwinds or mallets or whatever, then you have to write pieces down. But now, because the latest album, we only use real instruments, so everything's already been written down. So it would make a live performance with orchestra way easier. When we did Retrospect, our 10th anniversary with the real orchestra, we had to write down everything and then rearrange and score all those parts, and that took a lot of work.
That had previously been synths in some cases.
Yeah, so some parts were recorded. So like strings were partly written down, and choirs as well. But then brass and woodwinds, and we had to all score that for that event. But now it's already there. So.
Cool.
But if you're writing, you kind of start from, I can use whatever I want. I have this whole orchestra who can back up that guitar riff or whatever. So you don't really, there's no real boundaries. As far as the songwriting, you can pretty much use...
Do anything.
Yeah, you can, yeah. So it's not like, oh, we're a 6-piece band, so I can only write for 6 people. No, it's like, we're a 6-piece band with an orchestra behind us and a choir.
And we don't necessarily stick to symphonic orchestra, you know,
Yeah.
like ethnic instruments. I like to use that a lot, and percussion. But nowadays, with all the sample libraries you have, computers, you can do whatever you want. You know, name it, and you can find a sample and use it.
Right.
And then the fun part is to reenact that on the album. So really try to play all those instruments.
And also, I guess we all like film scores and all that, so it kind of also opens the big box of just samples or
Right.
a
So-
more modern sound.
Are you saying that you'll sometimes use a sample in sort of the early stages of writing a song,
Yeah, of
and then
course,
you'll
yeah.
want to go back and re-record it with your own take later?
Well, the thing is, you know, I don't have an orchestra at home, so
Right.
when I write songs, I use computers, and I
Right.
guess everybody does that, you know. I play the keyboard, so the pianos and that I already play. Then all the other stuff I put there with the mouse. You can even, you know, I can play guitar on my piano and then send it to Isaac, and he will make a guitar riff out of it, of course, because I don't know how to do that, and the drummer will make, you know, I play the drums on my piano, and the drummer will make real drum parts out of it.
But to start the demo, you'll,
Yeah, that's the demos, and then after all that's done, you know, after the might take a year or so, then when all the songs are ready to be recorded, then only then we go and score all the stuff and put the real musicians into place.
Cool.
And I'm a really bad keyboard player, so I also, when I'm writing stuff, I obviously will maybe have some ideas about keyboards. So then it takes me like forever to kind of program it, but I send it over to him and he can work on it.
Because a lot of your music is sort of conceptual, right? Like the music has an idea, there's a sort of a title and a concept around the track or around the album. Do you find that a lot of your pieces sort of just spring up of their own, or are there ever times when, you know, you'll think, oh, I've got this really great sort of concept for a bridge or a movement, and I don't know what to do with it, and sort of things get glued together? Does that ever happen?
Both?
Yeah, both. There's no real formula for it, you know. Sometimes the song writes itself, and sometimes it takes a long time to finally finish it. And, yeah.
Cool.
On the latest album, there's a song I rearranged. It took me around 3 albums to finish it. Like rearranging it again because it wasn't good enough for the third last. Then rearranging wasn't good enough for the second last, and then, you know. So that took me around maybe 6 years to get it done right. And then other songs on the new album, just wrote it in basically one day, you know, like it was there. And of course that doesn't mean that the whole choirs and the lyrics, and it's not written like you would hear it on the album, but the basic structure of what it actually is, if you strip it down, with the melodies, and then of course you're gonna like, oh, I got this melody, but now I'm gonna use the whole orchestra to play that melody. So one part of the melody comes from brass, the other one is violins, whatnot, you know, whatever you want. But the initial idea of the song can just pop up just like that, or you have one riff and before you know it, end of the day you have the whole song pretty much finished in its basic structure.
Yeah, it seems like the process of making is just to make, and then things sort of find their own timeline sometimes.
Yeah, exactly. You know, I remember one song I was kind of stuck, and then I just went out for a walk with the dog, and while a train was passing by and making a lot of noise, it popped, like the main melody of the song popped up, and I took my phone, sang it, and ran back to the home studio and recorded it.
Yeah.
And then that was the only part I was kind of missing. So it took me a while to get to that point, but then when I got it again, then the song was like, okay, yeah, this is it. I don't need to kind of work.
It is great now having these devices that we can just sort of tell our ideas to.
Yeah. I had the same thing driving the car, and the thing popped in my mind.
Hum a tune into the...
I had to give the phone to my wife, and she's actually a good singer, so I was singing it, and she was laughing on the background, like laughing her ass off. But that turned out to be one of the songs on the album, so it doesn't really matter how, or I always when that stuff goes into my mind, I'm on the toilet or in the shower.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to remember, and then when you're dried off, it's gone. Right?
Brilliant. Well, I know a lot of people, as soon as I posted on Facebook, I think, about the show tonight, and a lot of my friends were suddenly scrambling, like they didn't even know the show was happening.
Okay.
And they were like, what, they're in town tonight? Look, I gotta go get tickets. Because people just didn't know. I think a lot of the confusion is that the Masquerade moved, and I think that has just formed a big disconnect in people in Atlanta's brain.
But it's moved for over a year, so...
Yeah, we played
we
in
moved
this
slow.
venue.
We moved slow. Yeah, I know. But what should people keep an eye on for you? You obviously have another album added to your already impressive catalog. But is there anything that you want to plug, especially for people, other than the tour that you're already on?
The new EP.
Yeah.
We have an EP out. The 1st of September. It was released just before this tour.
Yep.
It's basically an how do you say it? Well, it's part of the whole holographic principle recording session. Those were the songs that didn't make the first cut of the album, and we released them on a 6-song EP. Mm-hmm. So it's all new material, it's all original material, and you can also buy it in an exclusive box set, the ultimate principle edition. And those songs just didn't make it on the album. We had 18 songs recorded out of the 27 ideas we had. And instead of releasing them on different bonus tracks like Japan or vinyl or iTunes, we wanted them to be more connected to the holographic principle. So now they're out on this EP called the Solar System, available everywhere.
Can you? That's an interesting thing that I've noticed and I've never gotten an answer on and it's particularly, it seems, with rock albums, that Japan almost always gets an extra track on their release, and only
not
Japan.
Anymore.
There's no right, but why has that been the case? There's no like Russian edition or Tibetan edition.
The reason for that is basically if you don't do that, they will not really release it there in the
They want
Japanese.
their own special release.
Yeah, exactly. Because if they don't get the song, they for some reason want people to import it, and obviously that will cost more for the fans over there. So it's kind of a tradition there, and it's like you said, it's pretty much.
It is a strange thing that only happens in Japan
yeah.
and seems to only happen with rock groups, at least
Yeah,
that I've noticed.
Even if you play there, they also want to, even if it's the most crappy venue you can imagine, they still want to record it and tape it, and then they put it out for the fans as something special, because for some reason they have this tradition of having special things. And I guess that's also, to come back on one of your earlier questions, I guess that's maybe for some bands the reason why they are like so big in Japan.